Hello science fans. Today let's unravel a phrase that chills the UK every winter, the polar vortex. It's often hyped as a monstrous Arctic storm, but is it really a snowpocalypse in waiting? The polar vortex is one of the most misunderstood concepts in weather forecasting. Instead of a storm, it's a fascinating, persistent feature of our atmosphere that shapes winter in surprising ways. We'll bust the biggest myths and reveal what the polar vortex truly is and isn't. Understanding it means separating science from media fiction and being prepared, not panicked. So, grab a warm drink as we journey to the top of the world and uncover the real story behind the polar vortex. Let's get started. First, let's clear up some myths. The polar vortex is a term that's been thrown around a lot in recent years, and with that, a lot of confusion has swirled up too. So before we dive into what it actually is, let's take a moment to separate fact from fiction. The polar vortex isn't a storm barreling down from the Arctic. It's not a hurricane, a blizzard, or a single event you can track as it moves across a map. You won't see it spinning like a cyclone on your local weather forecast, and it doesn't suddenly arrive with a wall of snow and ice. Instead, the polar vortex is a vast, persistent circulation of extremely cold air, high up in the stratosphere, always spinning around the North Pole during the winter months. It's a semi-permanent feature of our planet's atmosphere, not a fleeting weather event. Think of it as a giant invisible ring of icy wind, constantly circling the pole, shaping the weather far below. What we actually feel down here is its influence. When the vortex weakens, stretches, or wobbles, it can send frigid air spilling southward. But it's not the vortex itself arriving in your backyard. It's the ripple effect of its changes high above. Another common myth is that the polar vortex is something new, a recent phenomenon that's suddenly threatening our winters. In reality, the polar vortex is as old as the atmosphere itself. It's been swirling above the Arctic for as long as Earth has had seasons. The only thing new is the name's popularity. Media coverage has simply brought it into the spotlight in recent years. Its recent fame is more about how we talk about weather than about any new threat. Headlines and social media posts might make it sound like a modern menace, but it's really just a part of our planet's natural climate system. Some people also believe that whenever the polar vortex is mentioned, it means disaster is on the way. Blizzards, record-breaking cold, and chaos. But that's not always the case. Sometimes, a polar vortex event brings only a few days of crisp, cold weather, or perhaps just some wind and rain. It can be dramatic, but it can also be surprisingly mild. The word vortex sounds intense and even a bit ominous, but its impact varies widely. It's not always a headline-grabbing event. Sometimes it's just a subtle shift in the winter air. And no, a polar vortex event doesn't guarantee snow for everyone in the UK. Just because the air turns colder doesn't mean you'll wake up to a winter wonderland. Cold air alone isn't enough. You need moisture in the atmosphere for snow to form. Without it, you might just get a dry, biting chill, or perhaps a hard frost. Sometimes, the cold air brings only a deep freeze and clear blue skies, no snowflakes, just a sharp drop in temperature and a landscape locked in frost. For snow to fall, that Arctic chill needs to collide with moist air, often carried in from the Atlantic. It's the meeting of these two ingredients that creates the classic snowy scenes we associate with winter storms. That's why some regions get snowed in, while others just shiver through a cold snap with barely a dusting. The polar vortex sets the stage, but local conditions decide the outcome. The polar vortex is just one ingredient in a complex recipe. Other factors, like the jet stream, ocean temperatures, and local geography, all play a role in shaping what we actually experience. So, it's not a one-size-fits-all disaster. Sometimes, it's dramatic. Sometimes, it's barely noticeable, and often, it's somewhere in between. Understanding what the polar vortex isn't helps us appreciate what it actually does. By clearing up these myths, we can better prepare for and respond to whatever winter brings. Now that we've separated fact from fiction, let's move on to the real science behind the polar vortex and how it shapes our weather. So, what is the polar vortex? Picture a massive whirlpool of cold, low-pressure air high above the North Pole, spinning in the stratosphere. It's held in place by the polar night jet stream, a fast, high-altitude wind acting like a fence. When the vortex is strong, it keeps Arctic air locked up, giving the UK milder, wetter winters, but when it weakens, often due to sudden stratospheric warming, the fence buckles. Cold air escapes south, bringing dramatic temperature drops to Europe and the UK. The wavy jet stream can block milder air, leading to prolonged cold spells. So, when you hear polar vortex in the news, it's about the effects of a weakened, wobbly system, not a storm on the move. When the polar vortex weakens, we don't just get snow blanketing the ground. The effects are far more varied and dramatic, creating a full menu of winter weather across the UK. Sometimes it's a sharp, dry freeze, clear skies, hard frosts, and biting cold that seems to seep into your bones. The air feels crisp, and every surface sparkles with ice crystals, turning the landscape into a frosty wonderland. On these mornings, the world is silent except for the crunch of frost underfoot. Other times, the wobbly jet stream brings wild swings, powerful winds, and relentless rain as cold Arctic air collides with milder, moisture-laden Atlantic air. The sky darkens, trees sway, and rain lashes down, making it feel like the weather's in constant turmoil. This clash can fuel intense storms, trigger flash flooding, or simply leave us with days of unsettled, chilly, and damp weather that never quite settles down. The outcome all depends on how these cold and moist air masses interact. Sometimes the boundary between them is visible as mist or fog rolling over the fields, marking the front lines of the weather battle. If the cold air wins out, we're plunged into a deep freeze. Rivers freeze, fields are coated in thick frost, and roads become treacherous with ice. But if moisture meets the cold, we get a wintry mix, snowflakes drifting down, sleet rattling on pavements, or even freezing rain that coats everything in a slick, glassy layer. And when these air masses battle fiercely, the result can be dramatic. Thunderstorms, heavy downpours, and sudden bursts of wild weather that sweep across the country. The polar vortex sets the stage for all this action, but the final act is shaped by countless atmospheric players, jet streams, pressure systems, and the ever-changing dance of air masses above us. UK weather is rarely simple. Each day can bring a new surprise, and the polar vortex is just one part of the ongoing drama that plays out in our skies. In the end, it's all about the mix, the ever-changing blend of elements that makes British weather so famously unpredictable and endlessly fascinating. Let's look at real UK examples. The Beast from the East in 2018 was triggered by a weakened polar vortex, bringing Siberian air and heavy snow. Schools closed, transport halted, and the country froze, a classic snowstorm from a vortex breakdown. But in 2013-14, a disturbed vortex brought relentless storms and flooding, not snow. The jet stream aimed Atlantic storms at the UK, making it one of the wettest winters on record. More recently, in 2023-24, we saw brief cold snaps, followed by rapid returns to milder stormy weather. The same trigger, a wobbly vortex, can mean snow, floods, or wild swings. The outcome depends on how the atmosphere sets the stage. The polar vortex is the spark, but the weather story changes every time. Every autumn, headlines scream about Arctic blasts and polar vortex weather bombs. These stories exaggerate small chances into certain doom, causing needless anxiety. Weather forecasting is about probabilities, not certainties. A 30% chance of a cold snap becomes a guaranteed freeze in tabloids. Many articles are commentary, not forecasts. They cherry-pick dramatic model runs for clicks. Personifying the weather as a Siberian Express makes it sound scarier than it is. To be a savvy weather consumer, trust reliable sources like the Met Office or BBC Weather. They explain uncertainties and focus on what's most likely, not most dramatic. When you see a scary headline, check a trusted source for the real science. Don't let hype replace facts. Knowing the science is empowering. Now, let's talk preparation. Don't panic. Be practical. A polar vortex disruption means it's time for sensible winter prep. Check your home's insulation and draft proofing to stay warm and save on heating. Know where your water stopcock is, and insulate pipes to prevent freezing. Service your boiler before winter. For travel, keep an emergency kit in your car: blanket, torch, power bank, shovel, snacks, and a warm drink. Always check forecasts and traffic before long journeys. Dress in layers, eat hot meals, and look out for vulnerable neighbors. Community support is key during harsh weather. Preparation isn't about fear, it's about being ready for whatever winter brings. Stay informed, stay safe. Is climate change affecting the polar vortex? Scientists are investigating. The Arctic is warming twice as fast as the rest of the planet, reducing the temperature contrast that drives the jet stream. A weaker, wavier jet stream can let cold air spill south more often. Paradoxically, a warming planet could mean more severe winter cold in places like the UK. The science is complex and evolving. Not all researchers agree on the link. Other factors, like sea ice and tropical weather, also play a role. What's clear? Our planet's systems are deeply connected. Understanding the vortex helps us see how climate change might shape our future winters. The polar vortex isn't a monster or a new threat, it's a natural, powerful part of our atmosphere. For centuries it has quietly shaped our winters, influencing weather patterns across the globe. While it may sound ominous, the polar vortex is simply a vast ring of winds circling the Arctic, keeping frigid air locked in place, until, occasionally, it escapes and brings a chill to our doorsteps. Dramatic headlines often miss the real story. A dance of high-altitude winds and delicate balances that has been ongoing long before we started naming it. Sensational news can make us anxious, but the reality is far more fascinating and complex than a simple tale of doom. By busting myths and learning the science, we move from fear to informed awareness. Understanding how the polar vortex works helps us see the bigger picture, turning confusion into clarity and worry into curiosity. Next time you hear polar vortex, think critically. Is it the vortex itself, or just its effects? Ask yourself what's really happening in the atmosphere, and don't be afraid to question what you hear. Is it a forecast, or just hype? With so much information out there, it's important to separate fact from exaggeration. Reliable sources and a little scientific curiosity can help you see through the noise. Understanding weather connects us to the natural world and the forces shaping our lives. It reminds us that we're part of a much larger system, one that's always in motion and full of surprises. The vortex links the Arctic to our back gardens, a reminder of our dynamic planet. What happens at the top of the world can ripple all the way to our own neighborhoods, showing just how interconnected we all are. So, when winter bites and headlines swirl, stay informed, prepare sensibly, and look out for others. Simple steps, like checking forecasts, stocking up on essentials, and helping neighbors, can make a big difference. But also, be fascinated by the atmospheric dance above. There's beauty and wonder in the way our planet works, even in the coldest, stormiest days. Replace panic with curiosity, and face winter with confidence and wonder. Embrace the season as an opportunity to learn, explore, and connect with the world around you. That's what science is all about, transforming fear into fascination and helping us all understand the incredible forces that shape our everyday lives.